a red flag flying here.
And as we all emerge from the darkness, welcome everybody to the new year of Political Unmuted. And I'll welcome my guests. Hi, Sam.
Hello.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
You're very busy doing other things at the moment, aren't you?
Strangest thing, you'll hear about him a moment of the week.
That's cool. That's cool. Stuart, my golly, are you all right? You've rushed here. Are you okay?
I'm fine, yeah. Busy day.
Oh, I'm glad. Nothing's gone wrong. He's not a disaster. That's
No, not yet.
all right. And Laura, so lovely to see you. Myself included here. I just want to point out to the other members of the team how glamorous you are and how careful you have been to prepare to come on this very prestigious show. And I just want the rest of us, wild men of Borneo, hippie type, understand that lockdown need not necessarily be a relapse in being sloppy. Right, okay, my wife's going mad at me, by the way. So here we go.
Careful, John.
We start with... well, I'm going to just leave Paul to until last, so he can get on with what he's doing. You'll be very excited when you hear what it is, and my camera's really dark, isn't it? Yeah. And I think I'll start with Laura. Because you've been away from us for so long, so it's so lovely to see you back. What was your moment of the holidays?
Well, I think now it's being called glamorous. Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit here because, well, my moment of the holidays was that I had an amazing Christmas day, which was against all odds. It was really lovely. But actually, my moment of the holidays or week it happened today. In the House of Lords, the domestic abuse bill actually finally came to its final reading. It has been in the making for 3 years. This final reading should have happened 3 years ago, but one thing after another kept delaying it. So it's absolutely fantastic that this is back having the conversation. It was today at about 2:15, I think, and now it will go off to the committee stage to discuss any amendments that need to be made, and hopefully it'll just pass really quickly and we can get it into legislation, and it'll make a lot of lives so much safer and offer so much support that we just desperately need. So yay.
Just very briefly, what are the key aspects of that which make it so important?
Well, one of the amendments that got talked about today was actually they want to add into it that victims of domestic abuse who don't have access or money or any kind of support will be given access to community support groups and be able to use that. That wasn't something that was actually initially in there. Also, another one, the local authorities will now have the legal duty to provide secured accommodation for survivors. And one really important one that was in the news a lot last year is that the defense of rough sex when a woman is killed will be against the law because it's ridiculous. So yeah, so there's absolutely loads in there. It's jam-packed full of brilliant things. I didn't get to watch it at the House of Lords today. I've had a little scroll through the transcript and I didn't see anything too awful, but I'm going to have a better read of it and just make sure nothing is being taken out that really needs to be in there. But it's just a relief that after 3 years, finally something else hasn't gotten in the way. So yeah, it's really good news.
Spot on, and keep an eye on it for us as it goes through the processes. Stuart, moment of the holidays.
A couple of days ago, it was my daughter's birthday. So she had a very different kind of birthday.
Yeah.
You know, normally you'd have a party with kids and you might go somewhere and do something. And it was very different. It was a lot of Zoom calls and people coming to the window to say hello and stuff. But she managed. It's really showing how resilient kids are. You know, I understand that this is probably going to be a trauma for them in later life, having to live through COVID. But you know, I'm really proud of how she handled it, and you know, I'm chuffed as a father that I've managed to get a child up to the age of 8.
Well, in a year's time, I can very much promise that you'll manage to get them to the age of 9. We'll celebrate that as well. I feel so sorry for children whose birthdays happen at Christmas and New Year. Just get sort of lost in all the other festivities. So maybe it's just been nice that it's been such a different and special event for her, sort of important. Now, Sam, first of all, you sort of, are you allowed to go to your chickens? I saw you debating on Facebook whether you were allowed or not.
See, so right, I made a joke, and the joke was, they never tell me if I'm allowed to go and sort out my chickens in these rules. I've decided that I work for them. And that was the joke. I'm employed by my chickens. But then all of my friends, who are very kind and genuine people, quoted me the chapter and verse in the rules which states that I can go and look after livestock. No, I'm fairly sure. I mean, the Tories are capable of many things, but locking a woman away from her hens is probably not one of them.
I get asked all the time. I spend most of my time rooting through those rules because people say, am I allowed to do this? And am I allowed to do that? And sometimes you just say, oh, phone county hall, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your moment of the holidays, Sam?
I have continued doing exercise outside in the snow. And I, for one, am amazed.
Now, I know that this is an incredible achievement and we're all on your side, but I can't help but point out to listeners that there has been a reduction in your aspirations on this front, haven't there? Your red is not quite as hard on red as it was before when you started, is it?
I think that I never intended to run every day. I am doing Red January, which used to stand for run every day. But the people who run Red January realize that actually that's not very accessible to a lot of people. So now they're calling it realistic exercise daily. So no, I'm not necessarily running every day, but I've done a lot more running than I would usually do. And I did really well today, and I got snowed on. And but yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I'm not an exercisey person at all. I only started doing regular exercise in October, and all the people who were involved with, as you probably know, Aycliffe's got a running club, Shildon's got a running club. There are some very runny people around here, and they're all very supportive. And I've been brought into a Facebook group, and they're all cheering me on and very pleased for me, which is nice.
Just gets those endorphins going. It's a really
absolutely.
Every now and again you click into that purple patch where you just feel great and you motor. So it's sort of enjoy. Congratulations. We're all on your side. And Paul, now tell us all about this, your moment of the week, and sort of what's going on in the background there.
Okay, so I am a member of the Labour Party Irish Society, which very few people in the Northeast have actually even heard of that exists, and it seeks to represent communities of Irish people, whether that's on the island of Ireland or people with Irish heritage. And I somehow ended up running for vice chair of the whole society. Let's just say I don't think it's going well. I don't know yet. One of my friends is on at the moment, speaking in favor of a motion to support the rights of Gypsy Roma traveller people, which is something I absolutely fully endorse, and I am going to vote for that. But I'm actually on the AGM at the moment. We haven't found out what the results are yet, but it's really interesting. Like the schools minister, Wes Streeting, is there for some reason rather than crisis of schools that's going on, and for some reason Wes Streeting's there. Carwyn Jones, the Welsh First Minister, was on to speak about some motions, like sort of there's a left-wing group of people who have joined who are members of the Labour Party Irish Society, who've joined together to try and get some things through. And let's just say the right-wing Labour MPs are out in force, along with many people who work for the Labour Party and many people who are named the exact same thing. They've got the exact same Zoom name when the links was meant to be unique. So, fun times in the Labour Party Irish Society. So I'm just going to say if I have to vote. So
well, but sort of what we'll do is we'll leave you alone for a little while, and and thank you very much for your. I've got everybody, haven't I? I've asked you moments of the week. Sort of what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ask Paul to do the big story intro.
Big stories? I'm okay to do the
now it's time for the big story.
Now, are you sure, Paul? Because we can. We've got 4 other questions today. We can do.
Go for one of them, and then we'll do the big story second.
I'm just going to talk to people for a while. If you remember, I've done it differently this week, and I've tried it differently because what I've done in the past, I've gone through and I've decided to put the important stories when I put them in a poll, and then you've been allowed to choose the stories that you wanted to talk about tonight. And sort of, I just thought, well, that's a bit demeaning after 6 months. Maybe people are able to choose their own questions. So this week, for the first time, I didn't do that, and I just said, suggest questions. We got some fabulous questions sort of asked, and I was going to ask the first one to Paul, but we'll let him get on with what he's doing if he's got to vote, and I'm going to ask one of the other ones to other people, and we'll see how they go. What I'm going to do now is listen to this for a question. Well done, this person who asked this. Do we need a UK-wide strategy of how we care for our older citizens, and if so, what should it look like? And I just thought this is a really easy question, so I'll give it to Samantha. Samantha, do a UK-wide strategy of how we care for our older citizens, and if so, what should it look like?
Yeah, I mean, it is an easy question to me. I hope I hope you don't just give me easy questions, John.
I think that's a really hard question, Samantha. I couldn't answer.
All right. Well, I think it's quite easy when you look at the problem as most people see it, which is there's this huge sort of disconnect between health and social care and the NHS. And they come into health and social care expecting a similar experience of the NHS because that's what we've had our whole life. And then they suddenly find it's all markets and internal markets and privatized all over the place. And when things fall apart, it's up to local authorities to pick up the pieces, and local authorities don't have the money to. So I think that the first thing that needs to be done is we need to create a cohesive health and social care service, which is, based on the same principles as the NHS. For older people or people coming up to, not to speak for you, John, but you find yourself, you're at a catch-22 position, aren't you? If you've saved up all your life and you've got savings and you've got a house, you're more or less expected to pay your own way in elderly care.
So personally, but go on, carry on.
And sell your house, but if you have nothing, then you will still be cared for. You won't be cast out onto the street. If you need to go into a care home, you will, and it'll be picked up by somebody else. So well, but a lot of people don't feel it's fair, do they? They feel like, and maybe that's something that needs to be looked into. I mean, obviously, as a socialist, I believe people who can pay should, but I think that should be through their taxes rather than you know, their house. And I know that it's not very socialist to talk about that one where you give your money to your kids. That one, it's gone. Inheritance. It's not very socialist to talk about inheritance, and I do believe in inheritance, like having an inheritance tax, but especially at the moment, you know, we are at a situation where people can't do the normal things you expect to be able to do through one lifetime. I don't own a house. I don't own this house. I don't own a car. Well, I do own a car. It's a very, very cheap one. Lots of people are finding the only way they can get onto the housing ladder is through help from their parents. And so, yeah. And also it's just the way it is, again, people who have money find ways to keep it, and people who don't. There's this thing like people who have limited companies and put the money through that instead of keeping it in their own name, things like that. It's all a bit backhandy and a bit gloomy, but the point is, NHS social care needs to be one big thing. We need to get all of this private stuff out of the health and social care side so that they have what they need to do the job properly.
Thank you. Let's move on and see what other people say. I took 4 things out of that. 1, that I'm geriatric already. 2, that we need to join up the NHS and social care. 3, that we need to get rid of some of the privatisation, which is fragmenting and commercialising the service. And 4, that you don't think that people ought to have to sell their home and use their savings to look after themselves in their old age. Really interesting. I disagree very violently. Stuart, what have you got to say about that?
I think we need to make some demands. I think we need to sit down and decide what we all deserve in old age. You know, we need to set a standard of what we expect before we go to the decision maker.
And talk a bit more about that, Stuart. What kind of things do you think?
You know, security, dignity, very basic things that you don't often see. I see old people really struggling when they shouldn't have to. That's not right, is it? If we got together as a nation and decided that wasn't right, and we were going to look at ways to tackle it, something could get done. While we have this, cozy idea of we should all put money away and retired nicely, that, we're never going to sort out.
One of the things I agree with you there is I think it's an absolute outrage that so many pensioners are also on income support, and that the pension we give to old people to live on does not meet the minimum standards for life, for living in our country. It's sort of just an outrage. Money's at the basis of all dignity, I find. But I think you're talking about more than just money, aren't you? You're talking about place in society, support mechanisms, a meaningful life. Laura, what do you think about old people?
That's a different question, surely. I love old people. I love all people. I sort of agree with everything that Samantha just said. I think on a big scale, yes, we need to look at getting the NHS funded properly, having social care to work alongside that so they work together. But in the meantime, we really need to be ploughing money into local resources, local community hubs where we can help and actually offer community outreach, paid community outreach, so that the care and responsibility isn't once again falling predominantly on the women in the family who then can't go out. It's a domino effect, isn't it? This all goes back to where you're spending your government's money. It all needs to go to the right places. And I think if we concentrate on community outreach and don't have people like you guys constantly doing all the jobs when it really should be the government who funds and pays for those things, that would bridge the gap between what we've got now and the long way off of what we actually need, which is just properly
Isn't what
funded
you're
stuff.
saying, Laura, however, absolve families for what a basic family. I mean, I understand that if all your family is dead or living in Australia, well, but but when family lives local, aren't you basically by sort of saying we need to provide clubs, we need to provide carers, we need to provide all these services out of taxes, quite frankly? Does that not absolve people of what are basic family obligations?
I think they're basic human obligations. And so it's the whole country's responsibility to look after all of our vulnerable people, our old people, our young people. Yeah, it'd be absolutely lovely if you were in a position to look after your nana into our old age and have all the knowledge and know how to do that properly. That'd be wonderful. You'd also have to have quite a bit of money because you wouldn't be able to go to work. You know, it's just in our current society, we just don't have the access to that. We need some help because we've all, unfortunately, like, you know, not that long ago, people grew up in households where one of your parents could go to work and the other one could stay at home. We simply don't have that society anymore. We've all got to go out, and it's really difficult. So no, I don't think it's anything to do with absolving the responsibility. I think it's sharing the responsibility around.
Now, you see, I agree absolutely with you there, because basically it's a function of our neoliberal world that what they've done is they've screwed us down and screwed us down. And so we're all working harder and harder, and so we don't have the spare time. We don't have the ability for one of the partners to stay at home and do all these family duties. But they don't want to stump up the money through the taxes to actually provide alternatives for that. And so you get all these massive injustices and negligences that go on within a neoliberal society as extreme as our own. I'm going to come to you, Sam, and just disagree with you, and then I'll give you the chance to get back to me. My wife disagrees with me completely on this. I mean, we fall out about it because we've never smoked, we've never drank, we've taken holidays at home, we've been frugal, we've only lived in a relatively small home. We've lived very, very carefully. And so we do find ourselves with a home and a holiday home and some money in the bank. And she says, why, when these people have been flying off to Ibiza and pouring booze, and you can easily spend 30-40 pounds a week on alcohol and smoking and doing all these things and having these holidays in Florida, and then they roll up and they've got no money, and suddenly they're taking our money to make us look after ourselves, and they're paying for them and looking after them. That's not fair, says my wife. But I just don't agree with that. I think that part of your obligation as a human being is, one, whilst you're able to look after yourself, you have an obligation to look after yourself. And whilst I have the ability financially and mentally and physically, I realize that you believe that all these are coming to an end, Samantha. But while I have those powers, I should be looking after myself. And I should be paying to look after myself and being a productive member of society whilst I can. And those people who, for whatever reasons, find themselves unable to look after themselves, it is my duty, even though perhaps older, to nevertheless look after them. And I have no problem with stumping up and using the money and the assets that I possess to look after myself until I am no longer able to do it. And it's funny that you as a socialist just don't seem to accept that. You accept that it's your job to feed your family, it's your job to clothe your family, to provide them with warmth and heat and lighting while you're able to do. You don't sit there saying, I want the state to look after me. And why should that change? Even though it may be a struggle to do so, why should that change just because you're old?
Because what you're advocating for, in effect, is 100% inheritance tax. You're advocating for zero chance of inheritance based on just the luck of how you end up dying. And I just think that's just unfair. And it's the type of thing that socialism should protect us from. And like I said, I do think we should pay for it. I do think the people with the broadest shoulders should pay for it, and I think they should do that by paying the taxes. I think that's the only socialist way to get out of this situation. You're saying that somebody who has dementia will not be able to pass on anything to the next generation, but somebody who dies from a heart attack will. That's not fair. But I want to come back quickly to mention there is a feminist economic think tank called Women's Budget Group, and they have a campaign on about working towards a caring economy, and they have done the numbers. They're very good at the numbers, wow, and they have shown that just putting up the pay for carers is the single biggest thing we can do right now to improve the economy and to reduce inequality in our society. It's really powerful, really compelling, and we definitely need to do it.
I'd love to see that. That's the first thing. The second thing is this paid carers who work for companies, or are you talking about home carers who are unpaid?
That's a good point. I mean, this is specifically about carers who work in care homes, but definitely all of their research indicates that unpaid carers like me and people like me and Laura, who will end up with the vast majority of the caring and house-based work, even if they did a piece of research over the last lockdown about who ended up picking up the slack when the kids got kicked out of school the first time, and they found that there was absolutely zero correlation between a woman reducing her hours to care for the kids and how much she earned. Didn't matter how much she earned, whether the man earned more or less than her. In the vast majority of cases, it was women that scaled back their work so they could look after the children. It's absolutely disgusting.
Thank you very much. Now, one of the reasons, people, is that sort of we've done it this way, is that as we go, these are your questions, and I'm presuming that you have things that you think about this, and sort of, have you any clever ideas about how we should care for our older citizens? Euthanasia is not an option. And sort of, you can't suggest that, but sort of say it in the comments, because we have a little time after where we talk about your comments and try and treat them with the respect they deserve. So that's the first question. My second question is to Stuart, and again, thank you very much for putting the Stuart. Can our economy recover and sustain growth if we continue to adhere to the present economic system? Can our economy recover and sustain growth if we continue to adhere to the present economic system?
In the short term, our economy can recover. A neoliberal capitalist economy isn't really sustainable outright, because resources are, limited. We've only got one planet, we've only got so much stuff to dig up. So growth isn't unlimited, and I think we're going to be getting pretty close to when we need to change over without, wiping us all out. I think the important question is probably, is the economy going to recover for the people who need it? Because you hear about economies growing and always on the up, but I've not seen it get any better for anyone, in the last decade. So really, the economy recovering seems to only affect rich people, only affects big companies. The rest of us, we just put the work in and get now back out.
In fact, over the past 4 years, the people of County Durham, the economy of County Durham has grown, but the people of County Durham have become, on average, poorer. It just doesn't work. You're absolutely correct. So your problem is the word with sustained growth. So what kind of growth, if you don't think sustained growth is possible, what kind of growth, or if any, would you like to see? Or are you just talking about redistribution within an existing system?
We only have so much stuff, but we have untapped social value that we need to really dig into. Our job as human beings is to be valued and to be valuable. And I think if we were to start consider that as something that we could economically tap into, we'd have a good chance of an economy that could go a long time.
Thank you. Laura, can our economy recover and sustain growth if we continue to adhere to the present economic system?
No, no. I mean, honestly, like, I'm going to be brutally honest here. I don't know enough about economies and all that sort of stuff. Paul knows tons, and I think I glaze over when he tries to talk to me about it. But honestly, all we're seeing at the minute, we certainly can't do anything at the minute until we get rid of. I think Simon in the chat actually said something similar. We can't do anything at the minute while COVID's going on, because all we're seeing is people getting poorer and the rich are still making money. So something's not right. If we can have the rich becoming richer during this time, it's absolutely pathetic. So no, the system we've got now isn't working at all. If the poor are just getting poorer when we're all dying.
How would you wish, therefore, because people do think that this is a very hard left view, and that it involves us taxing sort of middle class people to death, sort of, and they don't like the word redistribution, but sort of, how would you see a more fairer way of society, and how would you model a different economic system then, Lauren?
Well, I think taxation is the way to go, but I certainly don't think it's going to fall on the shoulders of middle class people. I think that the problem is we've got a problem with the narrative in society that people think oh no, we shouldn't tax people because one day it might be me. Yeah, one day you might win X Factor and earn thousands, or your son might become a footballer and earn millions. That's not who we're even talking about. We're talking about massive corporations who earn money you couldn't even possibly imagine and don't pay any of that back. Now, they're the people we're talking about. And if you want Paul to give you a maths lesson on how long it would take you to earn $1 billion, then by all means, but it's astronomical amounts. So they're the people we need to be focusing on. They have more than enough money that they couldn't possibly spend. And I mean, for me, people shouldn't be allowed to earn that much money. I don't think you can do a job that would warrant that. And honestly, the kind of people who would get it anywhere close would be the people who earn the least, like all the
That's
key
a
workers.
concept to go to an election with. We're not going to have a minimum wage. We're going to have a maximum wage.
Yes, we are.
Paul. Let's look with that one. Paul, you sort of, first of all, how's your meeting gone? Have you finished your meeting?
Yeah. So there was like a big complaint at the end because of how undemocratic it was perceived to be, with the way ballots were, and loads of people just turning up on the night, including, like, as I said, Wes Streeton and people like that. But anyway, I am not the vice chair of the Labour Party Irish Society. You will probably be unsurprised to learn. But you know,
who is the vice chair of the Irish Society?
There was Deirdre, someone, I don't know their names off the top of my head.
One of your opponents. Well, the Irish,
yeah, but the incumbents were able to retain their positions. So anyway, if we're going to talk about the economics of the situation, what people really need to understand is that money does not grow on trees. It is typed into a computer. It is literally typed into a computer. Deficits are the difference between the amount of tax you collect and the amount of money you decide as the Bank of England to create. So if that deficit is there, if you want no deficit, you've got to tax more. But every single year, I think there's been about 5 years in the last 100 where we haven't run a deficit, and the world didn't collapse for running a deficit. So if deficits are inherently a bad thing, then why do we always do them? The problem is not a deficit. The problem is where the deficit goes. The deficit has increasingly been ending up in the hands of the wealthy, and we have seen this throughout the COVID crisis. They poured money in at the bottom, seemingly, to furlough people from work. And where did that money end up? The top, like, tiny percentage of people ended up increasing their wealth by 25%. And that's out of date now. I think it's more than that. So we're talking about billionaires. They've increased their wealth because that deficit increased. Every time the deficit goes up, that money ends up in the hands of the richest. Now that's a problem. And that's where you need to tax, either to remove the deficit or just come up with a system in which in which that money can circulate in communities. The way to do that is to encourage small businesses and give small businesses tax breaks and give big businesses massive taxation. Because the whole point of things like, I don't know, like big corporations, so Tesco, Coca-Cola, Asda, all these massive companies that are too big to fail, they'll be able to take that economic hit. Well, as soon as they took an economic hit, what did they do? They robbed it out of the pensions or something like that. So Philip Green robbed that pension money out of people as soon as he took a hit. The company didn't take a hit. He personally didn't take a hit. He took it from somewhere else. So we've got to think about, is there a point in companies that are that big, or would you much prefer that someone in your local community was maybe providing you with fruit and veg and you were paying for them to do that, and then the money retains within your community? Would you prefer that rather than people selling really, really cheap bread in Asda in the 90s for about, remember that when it was really cheap, it was about 10p a loaf for a period of time in the 90s, and then all the bakeries went out of business and then it went back up again? Do we prefer that, or do we prefer going to a baker? This is the sort of thing we need to think about, because the massive companies are being propped up by the state, and that there's loads of facts that, please go and research this, because there are loads of facts that say they are, and people who need it to have a little bit of help from the state aren't really getting that help, so they would collapse without the state.
I think the thing is that that's the big worry about that is when you get this pool of money which is just sat there not doing anything because the person doesn't actually need it to live on, then the amount of money in the economy is actually reducing. So we have a situation where the economy is growing, but the working money, the money that's going round, is actually reducing all the time, and sort of and that's why we're getting poorer. Sam, let's return to the question. Can our economy recover and sustain growth if we continue to adhere to the present economic system?
No, infinite growth is not possible, nor is it desirable, because for all the reasons we've said there, the growth, what does the growth do? Where is the growth? It's not here in Shildon, I'll tell you that much. It's somewhere else, and it's not helping us live a better life. So I think that we should switch to a well-being economy model. It is not easy. It's not easy to measure well-being, but it's a much better way of seeing if your growth is actually doing whatever it's meant to do. And on top of what Laura said there about people getting richer and richer, I would definitely move to a situation where the highest paid person in a company can only earn, for example, 20 times what the lowest paid person is being paid. And I just think that encourages everybody to work towards improving the company, and also it means the person at the top is accountable to everybody. And I just think it's a much better and a better way of making sure we don't get dragons at the top of a company.
I'm just going to challenge you there, and not because I don't agree with you, but because how possible is that? Because surely all that will happen is if you start trying to apply these the way these big companies avoid tax is that they sort of set up an advertising marketing division in Luxembourg and an administrative IT division, and sort of the company in Britain pays huge amounts of money to the marketing department in Brussels, and the sort of administrative department in Luxembourg. And therefore, that reduces their profit to a tiny amount, which actually isn't enough to actually pay any taxes on. That's how they do it. And sort of, and they sort of they have these massive structures and these huge things where they're paying literally hundreds of millions of pounds of bonuses, never mind their wage to people. And the poor people at the bottom of the chain, they're below on the minimum wage and below, and we're actually paying out of our taxes to keep their employees, give their employees enough to live on. The whole
Yeah.
thing is absolutely corrupt and evil. But the danger is, and the problem is, as soon as you start saying to these people, you will do this, they say, no, we won't, we're going. And so particularly now we're out of the EU, they can just jigger off to America. Where
So I love it. I love it. Go is my answer, right? We're all about sovereignty. I can't even say the word sovereignty right now. It's the buzzword. This is our country, and we can make laws and we can enforce them. And if people do not want to trade with us, they can go. There are thousands of ethical people in this country who will do the right thing. And the only reason they're not millionaires is because the loopholes are being exploited by unethical people. We need to kick them out so they can go. I don't care. We'll have more people like the people who run the co-op, and more people like the people who run John Lewis. I don't know if they're really good or not, but they're a bit good.
But really,
And
can we
less
afford to
people
lose
like
for Nissan
Amazon.
and Hitachi and McDonald's
We can have
the
ethical
Starbucks
entrepreneurialism.
to just
It is
go?
possible. The only reason they don't rise to the top at the moment is because it is impossible to be as successful as Amazon and be ethical.
So does this change need to happen quickly and just sort of or would you just turn up the heat bit by bit and give people the chance to move into gaps as they appeared? How would you go about creating this in a different model?
No. I mean, I would have been one of the people who said, if you have unethical hiring practices, I am not going to give you any COVID support, for example. And if that business then went under, well, sorry. And other people then people say, oh, and then people will lose their jobs, and then other people will start businesses and they will hire them again. We don't need unethical employers.
I think you've answered the question about can our economy recover and sustain growth. Stuart, finishes off on this topic. What's your feeling overall?
Ooh, I don't know. Jail sentences for people who dodged an idea.
I think with that sort of the COVID crisis has certainly highlighted a whole load of things that I would put people in jail for, but sort of right. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for those very moderate and sort of capitalist ideas. We'll move on really marvelously. I'm going to take two more questions. One very quickly from our campaigns coordinator, Laura. Is it time for, there's one of these words which just makes me, the blood drain from my face. Oh, by the way, did you have any comments about that, the economy? Sort of, do you think that these people...
I did have comments, I spoke to you about
it. Comments. Laura, sort of, is it time for proportional representation in both national and council elections?
Right, okay. Well, I had to do a bit of research on this, to be honest with you, because it turns out there's loads of different types of proportional representation. It depends which type you're talking about. And so I know I've only got 2 minutes, but just quickly for the people watching who might not know the difference. At the minute, God, I'm talking a million miles an hour. I haven't even... No,
it's good.
Sorry. So at the minute, we're working on a first past the post system, which basically means we've got 650 constituencies and you vote for who you want your MP to be. The most MPs wins a majority and wins government. Or we could go into what other makeups of government there could be, but basically the most MPs win. The number of seats, though, rarely correlates to the number of votes that have been cast. So, for example, if you had a really, really massive constituency with thousands and thousands of people next to it, one that had just a few people, then your votes carry the same weight because you still just get one MP. So percentage wise, the Tories last time round got 43.6% of the vote. So they didn't even get the most votes out of everyone who voted. It's just everyone else voted for a few different parties. So proportional representation would mean that your vote counts a little bit more because it's who you vote for. It's not just one MP, it's the whole lot of the country. if we had proportional representation at the last election, we'd now have 13 Brexit MPs in Parliament. The Lib Dems would have, I think it's an extra 64, and the Greens would have an extra 15. So trying to be non-partisan, take from that what you will, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. It would have meant Labour would have had more seats as well. Actually, we would have got 220 odd seats. It would have been more than we've got now. I think it's only by like 9 or 10 seats. And proportional representation basically means that every vote matters. I think it's difficult because there are really good arguments for and against both. If you went for proportional representation, then the link between you and your MP isn't there really, because you just fill up the seats, and then with the MPs that you get in, and then if you've got more votes, they just get placed from a list that the Labour Party puts together. Say, right, from the top of the list, these are your MPs. So you could get anybody. So it depends on how you feel about that link and working close with communities. For me, we've been saying for ages that it's all about grassroots, it's about community, it's about your local area. Clearly that hasn't been working for us though. If we can lose so dramatically, then we're missing a trick there. We're not getting into our communities as well as we need to be. But again, for democracy, every vote should matter. So I don't know which side of the fence I fall on this one, I'm afraid, John.
Thank you. That's Sam, and that is really fair summing up. Sam, I mean, I can understand at national level, but can you see proportional representation working at local level? Shall it be a disaster?
Yeah, well, it's a very good. One of the problems with our local elections and our local engagement in democracy is that voter turnout is usually very low. So it's potentially even easier to make those swings to get pretty undesirable people into positions of power. It's already quite easy to get an undesirable person into a local council, usually under the banner of an independent. We've got lots of independent councillors doing very unethical things at the moment, and they all clearly have very far right views, and they chose to run as an independent because then they could put this under like, I'm all for the local area and I don't have party political views, but they obviously do. So that is a worry, and it is a worry, like Laura said, about the connection then with the local area. If you've got your list of Labour representatives, for example, you ended up with somebody from Chester Street representing Shildon, it wouldn't work at all. So yeah, I can't see how it would work. And I always feel like, because at the moment we are the losers, right? At the moment we're the losers, and that's why we're talking about proportional representation. Nobody ever talks about electoral reform when they're in power. So it's kind of one of those sort of, we're onto a loser here, because whoever is in power is not going to allow proportional representation to happen, because that will be them giving away some of their power.
Thank you. Stuart, you've just been selected as the Labour candidate for Ferry Hill, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I'm an outsider.
I mean, sort of interesting. Are you for proportional representation or first past the post?
First past the post. I mean, if there was any part of our democracy you might want to reform, you'd look at the Lords first, wouldn't you? I think you can't really have our kind of democracy without a local link. You know, it's already very difficult to get elected as a parachute anywhere, let alone try to build something and have a vision and connect with people if you're from what is essentially just a spreadsheet dump, where you end up. I don't think that gives us anything.
It worked with the European Parliament, didn't it?
but that ends up, you get all these little bizarre coalitions of people trying to get very difficult things across the line, and it doesn't come across as people focused politics. You know, it might work brilliant for, you know, fishing treaties, but I don't think the kind of politics that you find with proportional representation is what we need. You know, we need community champions. We don't just want numbers.
Last, well, all I'll say to the people of Ferry Hill, if anybody's from Ferry Hill is listening in, if you want a community champion, get that chap on your team. My God, he's a community champion. And sort of, not that the other people on the screen aren't, but sort of Stuart is a good vote if you live in Ferry Hill. Last of all, Paul, you've got 2 questions. You've got 9 minutes left. Which do you want? Do you want the story about are schools COVID secure and can the spread of COVID be halted with them being open, which is really just sort of playing to your job? Or do you want what are the implications of the Brexit deal for the Good Friday Agreement, and is the deal approved by Parliament good or bad for the future of the 2 parts of Ireland, which is directly related to the meeting that you've just been in. Sort of which question do you want to take?
I'll do question 2 really briefly, and then I'll go on to schools if that's okay.
Right, well, rest of the team, I'm just going to let Paul talk because he's been so busy. We're just shut up and sort of, and I'll stop you after 2 minutes, Paul. Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, on Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
So the Good Friday Agreement, hardly anyone seems to have read it. I have. And what it does is it gives the people of the island of Ireland the right to a referendum on the terms of whether they want to stay in as part of Britain in Northern Ireland or whether they want to become a united Ireland. I think that this Brexit deal is pushing the people of Northern Ireland into agreeing for that, because what they're doing is the regulations are now different. There's a border in the Irish Sea, and that means that people are collaborating more over the non-border, really, between like the non-border on the island of Ireland. So what we have is we have this system where if you're born on the island of Ireland, you can have dual nationality, or if your grandparents are or your parents are, you can be a dual national, you can be British and you can be Irish. And what the Irish government have said is that they will fund healthcare in Europe for people of Northern Ireland, regardless of where they live, and regardless of whether they pay tax there. And they've also said they will fund Erasmus. Now, little things like that mean that they are now closer. So if you're in Northern Ireland, you have an advantage, and it is given to you by the Irish government. And I think that will create a closer and closer alliance between those two. And I think the inevitable outcome will be a united Ireland. And I don't think that is what people in the DUP set out to do when they aligned with Boris Johnson on this issue. And I don't think the Conservative and Unionist Party even considered it at all, because I think they just look at people and they say, you're subservient to us. We'll tell you what to do, Northern Ireland. You're one of our... They almost think of it like a colony. They're very much in that idea that you know, Britain has an empire. So yeah, I think we'll end up with a united Ireland.
2 minutes exactly, Paul. By the way.
Oh,
This must be a third. Right. Okay. Oh, and you kick off our. Talk to us about schools, and again, 2 minutes, Paul, and then I'll ask everybody else what they think about schools.
So, being a teacher, and I'm sure being a head teacher or a member of the senior leadership team, or anyone who works in a school, any school staff, we have been victimized, demonized. Trade unions have been victimized and demonized by the right-wing press. If there's ever a wake-up call about the kind of absolute bile that the press spew, the kind of way we're governed by people who don't respect the opinions of people who work in a profession or in an industry or whatever, those people know far more than those in government about it, and they should listen to those people. They're paid to make decisions based upon the information they find from the people who work in those industries or professions. Now, they haven't done that at all. They haven't listened to the profession through the trade union. They haven't listened to individual teachers. We've had people, including Kate Green, who is who was saying keep schools open, who is the Labour shadow minister for education after the sacking of Rebecca Long Bailey. She was saying keep schools open hours before it was announced that they were going to shut schools, and Keir Starmer called for schools to shut, and so was Keir Starmer, who was saying you've got to keep schools open. Now, they aren't listening. Listen to unions. Listen to people who work in a place. That's what unions are. They're people who work in a place. Listen to them. They know more than you. I wouldn't go in and tell them how to line up and go through a lobby and vote in a certain way, having been lobbied by
How to
big
line
business,
the pockets
etc.
of their mates. So
Yeah,
you wouldn't tell
yeah.
them how to do that.
I wouldn't tell them how to do that. I wouldn't tell them how to serve the interests of the rich rather than everyone else. And I don't think they should tell me how to teach.
Right, well, I'm going to stop you there. You've had your 2 minutes. God bless you. And let's just see what everybody else thinks. Schools, Samantha. Is this the government's biggest disaster yet?
Well, it should be, but I don't understand why these Tories are so Teflon coated that even now you've got people on Facebook going, what would you have done better? Like you give somebody a fully worked through alternative of what could be happening, and then at the end of it they'll say, yes, but you've got no answers. I've just told you the answers. Why aren't you listening to me? So yes, it should be. Like, this has been horrendous, and it's affecting like everybody who has a child in one way or another to different degrees. And there's so many people just waving it through and going, oh well, you know. No, not all well. This is absolutely horrendous. Again, horrendous for women, who will be the mass majority of the people who have to pick up the pieces here. It's horrendous for the economy that we purport to care so much about. I'm not going to say it's horrendous for kids, because actually it's not, because they will learn what they need to learn eventually. Like, it's not like if you don't learn what you need to learn in year 2, that's it, it's gone forever. You can learn it in year 3, you know.
Interrupt you there. Thank you, Sam, so much for those comments. Stuart, back for one day. Just time to meet everybody who's got it, catch it, and then give it to your grandma. Have you ever, and people were telling them, have you ever seen anything as stupid by a government in your whole born life?
Oh, nuts.
That was a rhetorical question, really. I shouldn't have asked you it, but carry on. Say what you're going to say.
The planning and the forethought. You could have given people a week to prepare. Families, schools, transport providers, and so on. And the government decided to give them 12 hours. So days of work, wasted time as teachers tried to prepare for something that wasn't going to happen. As parents got prepared for sending kids to school, to get them there for one day, to be told, oh yeah, that they've gone into the highest risk place that they could possibly be in. I've seen better planned out late night drunken kebab orders.
I think so too. And Laura, last question to you. You're on mute, by the way, and you've got less than a minute. I'm so sorry, run out of time. But how do you see things going from here on now? What does the government need to do to try and put this right?
Well, they're two completely different questions. How I see it going and what they need to do are completely different things. How I see it going is, I mean, the sort of saying, everything needs to be shut until the February half term. That absolutely needs to happen. However, everybody also still needs to go to work. Okay, so who gets to go to work and who gets to look after the kids? And it's all just a mess. And you know, I work for one of the teachers unions, and so I've seen a lot of the fear and the what on earth are we meant to do here? You know, like on Monday, teachers were going into school and then not sure if they were coming back on Tuesday, and then head teachers don't know what they're doing, and it honestly could not have been done any worse. I think what we need to do is keep the schools shut. Any of the graphs you look at, it doesn't take a scientist to say the times that the schools are open, the cases shoot up. It's really simple. Keep them shut, get the vaccine rolled out as quick and as conveniently as possible. There's, you know, questions around whether they're even doing that properly. You know, you get your first one, but you might not get your second one. Don't even get. Do you know what? Me and Paul have spoken about this quite a lot. I actually now I'm starting to think that we might actually be in the Matrix or something, because these people just keep coming up with new fantastical things that you just think, how is this happening? This is ludicrous. How are they getting away with it as well? Like Samantha said, people are still like, poor Boris, he's trying his best, isn't he? I could not do any worse if I was doing it myself. It's horrendous.
Thank you. Online learning, I'll just mention that. So to write everybody, wow, what four phenomenal people. If you've been listening to tonight, you've been privileged, haven't you? But what are your ideas? What we're going to do now is we're going to play you the so No Pass Around, which is our big tune. Come on, make your comments, and we'll spend half an hour just looking at what you've said and the comments you've made, and paying respect to them. And what do you think of what these fine people have been saying? Some people have to go now. Goodbye. We all say goodbye at this point. Bye-bye. But sort of, if you want to come back and join us to see what you've said, to hear us talking about what you've said, that's really good. And thank you so much for listening in. We're here now for the long haul. We'll be here through, hopefully bringing on a few guests for you, but listen now, no pass around. And if we're not going to see you in 5 minutes, see you next week. Bye-bye.
We'll keep the red flag flying here.